Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is shocking. Talking about two different topics. China container missiles. I said that right. Possible missiles that are in China containers. And yes, that kind of lines up with one of the Cornerstone dreams. And I'm also going to talk about Scalar Wave and some food shortages that are coming. What is wrong with this? You say, well, it's a piece of bread. You're right. It's a piece of bread I took out of this loaf. This loaf is a 1 pound loaf, and there's something missing from this bread. Even though it says it is whole wheat, there's still something missing from this and almost all of the bread you're eating. See, the story was in 1860, the smart humans decided that they were going to outstrip God and that they could figure out a way to where the flour would not spoil, because once you break the wheat berry, then it begins to spoil, and in 7 to 10 days, it's got mold. So they figured out how they could be smarter than God. We're going to take out the outside shell and then the wheat germ. We're only going to use the white powder part of the wheat. And that doesn't spoil. And they're right. You can put it in a bag. 5 years later, it's still there. But then, of course, there's something else they removed. And that is most. Now, not all, but most of the nutrition. So then they had to pass all of these laws saying you got to put niacin, you got to put vitamins, you got to do this, put all of this into the... So why not just use what God made? So the difference between this and what I made is this. That's the difference in my bread, whole wheat bread, versus what you buy in the store. The bigger slice here, this is actually cherry, cinnamon, honey, and vanilla mixed together. And I made this. So when you make your own homemade bread, you can make it flavor any way. You want jalapeno, you got it. You want to have seeds, sesame seeds, however you want to, you can make it. But the big advantage to making your own whole wheat bread is that it's probably the cheapest way to have long-term storage food, because most of your long-term storage food companies cost $9,000 to $10,000 per person per year. But at Joseph's Kitchen, they can show you how to feed your family for about $1,000 per person per year, and it's whole wheat. Okay, so what is whole wheat over the regular wheat? Well, you remember the 7 years of plenty followed by the 7 years of famine of Joseph and the Pharaoh. Well, that meant that the whole world lived off of wheat for 7 years. Now, I don't think that maybe Jesus said, man should not live by bread alone, meaning you should have other things that you should eat. However, about the closest thing out there that'll feed you not only good tasting, but also nutrition for your body is wheat. And so we recommend you go to josephskitchen.com. When you go there, you got to get two things. One is you have to get a machine package. That's the items that you need to actually physically make the bread. It's a wheat grinder where you put the wheat in. 30 seconds later, you have flour. You put it into a bread machine with 6 other ingredients. Push a button, 2 hours, 20 minutes later, you have a nice, hot, steaming loaf of wonderful, that you made, whole wheat bread. Slice that up. The slicer's even included. The beakers, everything. It's everything you need to make bread. Then you decide how much food you want to have. You want to have food for 6 people 1 year, 4 people 1 year, 2 people 1 year. You place your order, and they have it in stock. Because most of these long-term storage food places, they're out. Some of them are 2 or 3 months. Some of them are even longer behind in filling their orders. But at Joseph Kitchen, they can ship within 2 or 3 days. And they ship around the world. Go to josephskitchen.com. I'm telling you that the prophecies say there's about to be a food shortage. And if you want to listen to what God's trying to warn us about, then you'll get this long-term storage food. I'm about to show you a clip of 1962, I believe it was, where President Lyndon Baines Johnson said, "He who controls the weather will control the world." Now, notice what he does not say. He does not mention airplanes spraying, but rather satellites, meaning electronic means. In other words, how they control the weather. Now, the spraying may have something to do with it, but there's no question that electronically is how they control the weather, and I'll explain what Scalar Wave is here in just a minute. Watch this short clip of President Johnson, 1962.
As a result, I think the people in the Congress are going to support it. And that message calls for new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
So what I'm going to talk about now is Scalar Wave. I've talked about this before, and I've got a special way you can see this for free. So back in like about 2014, 2012, somewhere in there, we had Bill Snebling come in. This guy's an excellent researcher, and he has the ability to take some really complex things and explain it so that us normal people can understand it. I asked him to research this, and he explains that the Russians already have, now we believe now it's not just the Russians, but it's definitely in the hands of the Moloch and Baal worshippers, have the ability to knock out anything on the land, on the sea, under the sea, any place on the globe, anytime they want to, and it's just almost impossible to tell where it came from. Scalar Wave has changed how war is conducted. It does not travel like radar from point A to B. Instead, it's interdimensional, and it leaves A and arrives at C without a trace of B. It's believed to be what took out the Thresher submarine, the Challenger, and also believed able to take out large amounts of birds in flight, dead before they hit the ground, or fish before they float to the surface, dead. It also believed what took out Gary Powers' U-2 spy plane over Russia in the 1960s. So this is not new technology, but it's very, very powerful. Anyway, we made this particular DVD available for you to watch for free. Why? Because I think it's important that you understand Scalar Wave. When you see a tornado or hurricane these days, when you see a flood or a drought, when you see a strange fire, or when you see 110 different food processing plants all blowed up, all in the last 12 months, and they haven't arrested anybody, I want you to understand it is probably Scalar Wave. So what you do is go to watchprophecyclub.com. I'll say it again. You're going to get this DVD. You can watch it for free through the month of September at watchprophecyclub.com. Free. Watchprophecyclub.com. It's 2.5 hours, professionally produced, very, very nice DVD. Here's the simple explanation on how it works. Essentially, they have two transmitters. One here sends a signal across the earth, and another one here sends a signal across the earth. And sad part is it doesn't take very much, like 100, 150 watts. But when these two signals intersect, then is the damage. So the way it works is like this. Over the horizon, death. And they can do amazing things with this Scalar Wave. February 27, 2011, Leslie, during time of praise and worship, said she got a word from the Lord. Now, she doesn't get this very often. But when she gets it, when Leslie says she heard from God, I stop, I set up, bend my ears forward, and I pay attention. I actually normally start recording it because every word is crucial. She says there's going to be something put in our water system in many cities of this nation. People will begin to get sick, some die. Many turn to drinking bottled water. Environmentalists will begin to complain about the plastic bottles damaging Mother Earth. The Lord said, these are a lie. My children that have ears, make sure you get a good, reliable water filter. Now, we can't make water appear in the water filter, but if you have a water filter, you can pull it off your roof. You can pull it out of a mud puddle, pretty much any place. You run it through the top of it. Just pour in the top. This is what the missionaries use. They've been using this stuff, I don't know, 40, 50 years. They pour it in the top, and out comes clean water. So if you have some kind of water source, this will make it. Goes on to say you'll not be able to trust the tap water or the bottled water. In other words, there's going to be an active attempt to try to kill people by poisoning the water. This guy here also confirms it. You can go to Brighteon, type in watch the water, and you can watch him explain to you that they're already, not coming, already putting poison into our water. Now let's talk about the China missiles. Now, I read this, well, I guess it was back in June. I'm not going to read all of it, but I just want to point out something about containers. June 15, 2022, Dana Coverstone. When the dream started, I was standing at the port of Los Angeles. There was a big sign. In the shipping yard were the larger containers being lifted off the ships. I saw 8 jet black containers. That's the important part. You want to notice that. 8 jet black containers sat on the ground about 15 feet apart, and they were pristine and clean with larger Chinese letters in black on them as well. It was light outside, and I could also see a large clock tower that seemed to be high above the shipping facility. It was exactly 3 o'clock, and all 8 doors of the containers began to bang and shake violently. All right, now I'm going to tell you something that I did not tell you when I read this back in June. And that is, you see that 3 o'clock where he says, I see a large clock tower? That's not unimportant. That's very important. What God is giving us here, okay, so a clock tells time. And that is still telling us time. But in this case, it's not time in terms of 24 hours. It's what time in terms of years. I believe it's saying this takes place in 2023 for 3 o'clock, okay? Suddenly the doors opened, and a man in the military equipment rode out of the first container on a very large dirt bike, green dirt bike. It had leather saddlebags on both sides of the seat and very knobby tires. The helmet came off the head of the man, and the motorcycle, he stepped off the bike after putting the kickstand down. He was Oriental and began screaming towards the trucks and pointing in different directions. He was very, very angry, and his face was very, very red, and suddenly checked his watch and put his helmet on and got back on the motorcycle and started it. The clock struck 4. Means now at this point, it's 2024. It's trying to tell us when this takes place. In 2024, it's saying that the Chinese, having to do with something about containers, are going to be causing some problems in America. The clock struck 4, there was a deep bell that rang, and the earth shook for a moment. Then, out of each container came about 25 soldiers on the same kind of motorcycles. Now, what it's saying here is, it may be literally they're going to put soldiers in them. But it may also mean that inside those containers, there's something has to do with military. 25 soldiers on the same kind of motorcycles with saddlebags, AK-47s over their backs. At this point, I could see RPGs and lots of ammo and weapons in those saddlebags. And when the first soldier took off out of the port, the rest of them followed and went in different directions once they were outside the fence line. The scene changed. I was hearing news reports and seeing newspaper headlines with serious-faced reporters announcing deaths all over the country in both rural and metropolitan areas. I hope you are listening. The reports were about water systems being poisoned. Now, Leslie saw it. This other guy has intelligence information on it. And now Dana Coverstone was told by the angel in a dream that there is poison coming to American water supplies, and you can't count on bottled, and you can't count on the tap water. Deaths all over the country in both rural and metropolitan areas. The reports are about water systems being poisoned in various places around the country. I saw headlines, entire communities poisoned through water supply. Reporters were telling people to drink nothing but bottled water, same thing Leslie was told, or water that they knew was not connected to the local water supply. It was affecting both larger and smaller communities, but not every community. It was impacting the West more than other places, according to the reports, and they were announcing that there were National Guard units, fully armed, watching over water facilities. Thousands were reported as having died, and hospitals were full of heavily poisoned people getting medical treatment. FEMA centers were being set up in those regions, An emergency broadcast announcement was running along the bottom of the TV screens and monitors stating that boiling water, listen, boiling water was not an effective way of making any water safe. Okay. Now, if it's a bug, like a virus or like a bacteria, boiling water fix it. But this is some kind of a poison. I then saw a clock tower above a municipal water supply, and its hands pointed to 4:05 in the afternoon. That means shortly after 2024, in my opinion. So, what do? I'd recommend you go to prophecyclub.com. We just got a big shipment of Berkey water filters in, specifically for our people, specifically so that we can provide them, because I don't know if you know this or not, but most places are out of Berkey water filters. They're out. In fact, might be the reason they're out is because Prophecy Club bought them all up. I mean, we bought a lot of them so that we can provide them to you. If you want to get it, you go to prophecyclub.com and you click on this right here where it says Berkeys. Then it'll take you to this page. We have all of these in stock. Right now, we've been out before. Most places are out. We have them all in stock, and I'd recommend you get one. The one that I have, and all of my water goes through it, is this guy right here. It has 8 black filters. The more filters, the faster it can filter the water. This one here is big enough to provide water for the whole neighborhood. All right, now, let's go to the next thing. April 7th, 2022, Strange Sound says, why are so many container ships missing? Are they transporting weapons in preparation for World War III? He says, so I was looking into the supply chain distributions that were caused by COVID to try to figure out if any of them would impact my investments in the stock market. He says, I'm looking at supply chain disruptions caused by issues with international shipping only because I wanted to make sure that the companies invested in won't have problems with their operations and they can easily arrange for their own pickup from a port or more than adequately funded to do so. The ones that ship goods internationally, Vessel Finder, Flight Radar 24, are both good sources to be able to track these places. Now, what he's about to explain to you is that inside these containers, remember what Coverstone was just told, some kind of military operation has to do with containers in general. But they believe that these containers could be opened up, just like you see it in this picture, and all of a sudden missiles are fired right out of them. Or they could have people inside of them, or they could have all kinds of weapons inside these containers. It's an easy way. Of course, these days, just carry it across the southern border. But anyway, let's go on. This is where I ran into problems. The container ships have not slowed down at all during the pandemic. I found out that some of the ships just hanging out at the ports aren't just hanging out at the ports. They aren't at the ports at all. They aren't being stored anywhere. They're just missing. Okay, this is not a container or two. These are container ships with, I don't know how many they have, several hundred, maybe 1,000 of these containers on each ship. An entire container ship missing? I tried looking at the container ship traffic maps online, and there were quite a few less container ships traveling than usual for certain periods over the last year or so. They're still traveling, but they're going dark, meaning turning off their tracking. I looked at photos of the ports on social media, checking the dates the pictures posted, and the count of ships anchored did not match what should have been there based upon the maps. After checking ship traffic to any given port and counting how many ships should have been there, the maps never showed the ships leaving. I realized that there's a discrepancy. In other words, we have container ships full of what could be soldiers, could be military equipment, could be bombs, could be nuclear, who knows, that are missing. They turned off the tracking. Now, why are they doing that? So the article goes on to say, so why are all the missing ships? Where are they? They clearly left the ports and went somewhere, but their new routes aren't being displayed. The biggest reported container ship disruptions were in China. Supposedly the ports were almost completely shut down due to COVID. I found some other strange things. I found that after some ships were unloaded, the regular materials that were there were unloaded, and the materials are being stored in warehouses, but the organic material is simply being dumped. This could be due to trying to minimize the issue of goods going bad. But why unload building materials which don't have a shelf life? Does it sound like they're just dumping what's in the containers to put something more important in there so that they can sneak it into America? It looks like there are missing Chinese ships. There's about 90% decrease in Chinese vessels sending signals. Did you catch that? A 90% decrease in Chinese vessels sending signals. 90%? 90%? Are they hiding 90%? Now, this is not one container. These are container ships having hundreds of these containers. There are also reports of Russian cargo ships going dark. We have missing Chinese ships, missing Russian ships. I also learned that quite a few countries have developed weapons specifically designed to be launched from container ships. Then there's also the container ship that had a fire off the coast of Vancouver Island, a fire that somehow resulted in over 100 containers falling overboard. The ship is called the Zim Kingston. It doesn't look like the ship caught fire to me. It looks like it exploded. So I looked up the picture. Here's the picture. Now, if one of those containers caught on fire, I would expect to see holes. If 2 or 3 of them caught on fire, I would expect to see holes. But like he says, this doesn't look like a container caught on fire. This looks like there was an explosion. It took out hundreds of containers. It says here, 109 containers go overboard from the fire. Well, if they were just burning, they would just melt, stay in place, he says. I agree. And for some reason, the authorities just can't actually seem to get a list of what actually was in the containers. I have to suspect that this is part of what Coverstone was told in his dream. I've been telling you guys, God is talking if we have ears to hear. Then let's go to global famine to plague Earth from 2022 to 2024. It is already set in motion and cannot be stopped. A convergence of horrifying events has set into motion an irreversible collapse of food production and crop harvests that will lead to global famine all the way through 2024. These events cannot be stopped for the simple reason that plants take time to grow. Economic sanctions against Russia causing a halting of exports for food and fertilizer. War in Ukraine leading to a halting of the 2022 planting season for wheat, corn, soy, and other crops. War in the Black Sea blocking ship movements. The Biden administration shutting down fossil fuel distribution in the USA and drilling. Global fiat currency money printing, money making food inflation reach atrocious levels. Global famine likely this year. This is a different one, okay? This one was European Union Times. This one is National Times. It says, a global famine will occur closer to autumn by the end of this year all over the world, not just here. That there's going to be an increase in the cost of wheat in the world market. Wheat prices have already shot up more than 60% this year, with the latest spike resulting from supply disruptions caused by the conflict in Ukraine and Western sanctions against Moscow. Now, let's talk about the food shortage. UN and World Economic Forum behind global war on farmers. The escalating regulatory attack on agricultural producers from Holland and the United States to Sri Lanka and beyond is closely tied to the United Nations Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, when they say UN, when they say Agenda 2030, think Moloch and Baal worshippers. These are the people that believe in killing people. They are trying to kill us because the more Lucifer can kill God's people, the happier he is. He comes not but for to kill, steal, and destroy. Millions of people worldwide are facing dangerous food shortage, and they expect it to get worse as the year goes on. Now, you and I say, oh, but the devil says, yay. So you got to understand who our real enemy is here. Why is California being forced to go through yet another historic nightmare? Very good article. For years, bad things have been happening to California. Is there a reason why the state is being forced to endure crisis after crisis? Well, I'm going to answer that. My opinion, yes, because the wages of sin is death. So as we fall away from Christ, then that allows the devil to come in to kill, steal, and destroy more and more and more. So if there was a mass repentance in California, you would see a lot of this stuff stop. This week, an unprecedented heat wave is making headlines all over the globe. Over 1 million California residents experienced high temperatures of at least 110 degrees. It was the 9th day in a row when at least some part of the state has been under a heat alert. Of course, this comes on the tail of a summer that has been extremely bitterly hot. The endless heat, endless drought have been absolutely devastating on agricultural production, and it seems like the wildfires never stop. Now, I know some people think, well, wish California would go ahead and fall in the ocean. I mean, not really, but a lot of people don't like Californians, think they're just fruits and nuts. And they do have a lot of problems. But you got to remember that we get a lot of our produce from California. And it's been said, as California goes, so goes the nation. California could really use a break right now, but instead it appears that the current heat wave may stick around for a while. Record temperatures, fueling destructive wildfires, threatening rolling power shutoffs in California. Some cities in California have broken old records over 10 degrees. 10 degrees hotter, not just 1 degree hotter, but 10 degrees hotter, and they've gone back to a all-time record high of 116 degrees. Sacramento hit 116 degrees, the hottest day on record for the state capital. Some cities are shattering previous daily records of more than 10 degrees. A drought, southwestern United States since 2000 marks the driest 22-year period of the past 1,200 years. So what's happening in California? This is no accident. This is Scalar Wave, my brothers and sisters. So it sends a signal over the horizon, sends another signal and intercepts, and they don't even have to be, they're like 100, maybe 150 watts. That's not a lot of power. But when those two signals intercept, it can cause tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, fires, all kinds of things. CornerstoneAssetMetals.com is where I'll send you if you're thinking about getting gold or silver. I think everybody should have at least a fistful of gold and a fistful of silver, because there could be a time when you pull up to get gasoline and they might not want to take your loaf of bread, but you pull out a gold coin or a silver coin, and you're probably able to get anything you want, even if the credit cards are down, even if the dollars are worthless. CornerstoneAssetMetals.com. CornerstoneAssetMetals.com.